everybody, welcome back to another lesson video. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone that watched my previous video. It blew up a little bit bigger than I thought it was, so it was really nice to get a lot of really nice compliments and comments about the video and stuff like that. It means a lot. I really appreciate that. That was a nice surprise. I guess maybe because it was kind of a gimmicky, kind of clickbait video. That's part of the reason why I guess it did so popular. But still, I'm not complaining if it gets more people to sort of understand Allan's music and how he thinks of chords and stuff like that, or just to see what's available out there in terms of how difficult those chords can get, then that's great. But back to the normal lesson videos. Today we're going to do funnels, and this song is actually relatively simple in terms of its structure, but it's really difficult to play, so I'm going to do a couple of things different in this video. I'm going to show alternate ways to play some of these chords, and also as a bonus, I'm going to show the idea of what Allan's thinking during that section. That's sort of the slash chord section. I think everyone sort of knows what I'm talking about if you're familiar with the song. So I'll do that separately towards the end, and I'll be able to thank a couple of people that had helped me out actually deciphering it. So anyway, here is funnels. So this song is one of the few Allan songs where the head of the song is the entire solo section as well. There are a couple of Allan songs where, well, most of them are, the head is usually different from the solo section, or at least it's some sort of variation. In this instance, both parts are exactly the same, and he talks about that in the REH video, so it's easy for everyone to sort of understand. So the structure of the song is really not that difficult, but the chords, as you'll see, are another story. So if you watch my top 10 video, the first chord of the song is actually my number 2 chord. This particular voicing though is up here on B flat. So it's a B flat major 7 sharp 11. Then it goes to this F major at 11. Now you might have seen other lesson videos where I've used this chord. I know Allan uses this in the Things You See. That was the first time I saw it. It's basically just an F major, but now you're playing the 11 in there as well. This is a pretty interesting voicing of it. And you can also play this other ways, which I'll show later. So B flat major 7 sharp 11. It's an F major at 11. Then to a D minor at 11. It's really built from the same interval structure as before, and then C major at 11. And then it gets transposed to F sharp. So an F sharp major 7 sharp 11 to a C sharp at 11 to an F sharp major 7 to a B major at 9. It's sort of built from this B sus2 chord, but you're playing the major third with your pinky. Now the reason why that is so difficult to play, but the way that why Allan plays it that way, is because you're really not lifting your fingers at all for that entire section, except for when you get to the F sharp. Your fingers are basically staying on the same strings and basically in the same configuration. It's just the amount that you have to stretch with your first finger or even second finger. So I'll play it here a little bit again. So as you can see, that's really, really tough. But I'm going to show a different way of how to play that. So now after that section, you have a whole bunch of suspended chords. You can think of this as a sus2 chord or a sus4 chord, but it's up to interpretation. So I'm going to think of this as a sus4 chord because it's going to be easier for me to see. What makes this part so difficult is really getting all of your fingers in the frets here, all kind of cramped up. I have no idea how Allan actually does this. He actually just might be playing the top third of the chord instead of playing all 4 notes. But the actual structure of this is a little free again. It's A sus4 to G sus4, and that's really tough. because of the amount that you have to sort of squish it. Now also this guitar is has a scale length of 25 inches, so it makes the frets even smaller, and because of this horn, I really have very little room to get into. But that's how it's played. And then you have a D sus4, C sus4, B flat sus4. What's interesting of that whole section is that it's almost 100% diatonic. Your A sus4 here has an E in it, but then this B flat sus4 here has an E flat in it. So it kind of blurs the line between B flat major and F major. I'd love to see how Allan interprets this in his chart, if he thinks of it as two different, as F major to B flat major, or just sort of says, oh, for the most part it's B flat major, because that A flat doesn't happen often, it just happens in the beginning. So it happens here, and then it goes back up, B flat, C, D, F, D, C, and now instead of going to B flat, you play this, which is a really awesome F sharp major 7 voicing. That's where that sounds really, really nice. Then it basically repeats the same way again. But this time you stop on D. And now this part is where I'm going to take a departure for how I normally label these chords. Ordinarily, if you've seen all of my videos, I don't really like to use slash chords too much. But in this instance, there's no alternative. I have to call them slash chords, and I'm going to show you why later. If you try to think of these as individual chords, which you can, it's going to make life really, really, really difficult. But I believe Allan thinks of these chords as not necessarily as a specific voicing, but sort of as a bass movement and then an upper triad movement. So I'm going to talk about them as slash chords and not actual chords. Like, for example, the first chord here, you can think of as an F sharp minor 11, but I think the best way to really interpret it as is a E sus4 with an F sharp in the bass. Then the next chord is an F major with an E in the bass, which you can think of as F major 7. Then you move all the way up here to a G sharp major with a in the bass, which is like a major 7, I think a minor major 7 sharp 11. Yeah, your sharp 11, you get your minor, and then your major 7, and then an F major with an A flat in the bass, which is like an F sharp major with a added minor 3rd. So that's why this section is so wacky. But I think the best way to think of it is the top half of the chord is going E sus4, F, A flat, F, and then it repeats that way again, but now with the bass note different. So the first time the bass is going F sharp, E, A flat. Then the bass note gets transferred to the low E string. Basically, it's playing the same frets. It's now like it's a 4th down. So now you have C sharp with the E sus4 with the C sharp in the bass, a F major with a B in the bass, G sharp major, A flat major with an E in the bass, and then you take this chord and pivot all the way down a 4th to A. So now it's a C sharp major with an A in the bass. And then from there, that whole section gets transposed down a 4th. So now you have a B sus4 with the C sharp in the bass, C major with the B in the bass, D sharp major with an E in the bass, a C major with a D flat in the bass, and then it's exactly the same. It gets transposed, so now the bass note goes down a 4th. So B sus4 with an A flat in the bass, a C major with a G flat in the bass, a D sharp major with a B in the bass, and then from there you actually go to this chord now, which is how I think of it as a D major at 11. So don't worry too much about the names of these things, because at the end of the video I'm going to talk about the the names of them again, so you can actually, I'm going to do an analysis of it. So that section, and also the way that Allan plays it, he likes to play the melody on the top two notes. So we've got this. So that's that whole section. Then after that comes, Allan's not really playing specific major chords here. It's basically, I think of them as major chords, but it's really a 3-note chord. But he's missing some of the components to make it a full like added note chord. So I like to think of these as add 11 chords. It might be a little bit easier to think of it as another way, but I think this is how he's interpreting them as. So after you have a D major, but he's not playing the A here. He's just playing the top 3 strings, the G, B, and the D string. So I think of this as the top half of a major chord of D major, and you're adding the 11. So then from there, you have a G major at 11, and then an E flat major with an add sharp 11, and then a D major again with an add 11. And then once again, he's always playing around with that. So sometimes he'll play an E in there and then play a D on the G string. And sometimes he even plays the first chord as major and then adds the 11 after it. Something like that. Something like that. Then it repeats almost the same way. You start off again with that G major with the add 11. And then you go to F major. Add that, now that has the sharp 11. And then E major with the add 11. And then finally, this was the number 2 chord in my lesson video, my top 10 video, that E flat, major 7, sharp 11 that I can't play, would actually happen here. But what you could do, and sometimes he does this, is actually he does this more often than not, that E flat only happens at the end of the song, is he actually plays a G minor add 9, like that, which is really the top half of it, and the bass would be playing an E flat. Then you can go over here, which is, you can think of this chord as 2 ways. Think of it as D minor 7 sharp 5, or a B flat add 9, and then move that chord a whole step down, and then it would be an A flat add 9, or a C minor 7 sharp 5. So now, that's how that entire song is, and I think at the end there's just some light chordal improv. I don't know if Allan and the band is thinking of a specific key or not, but those are all the chords. So in the next section, I'm going to talk about different ways that you can actually play this song that'll be physically easier, and also some different variations that Allan has done to actually, when he's playing, because like I said, the song has a lot of variation to it when he's playing it live. It's not always the same way twice. So because of the stretchy nature of some of these chords, it becomes really difficult to play. So the reason why Allan's playing them like this is because he's basically treating all the notes in the chord as a note melody. So instead of playing like something like that, he basically wants to play all the notes at the same time while playing an E, in this case a B flat on the bottom, which is what makes that so tough. So what you could do is, since you can't really play it like that, at least for most people can't, you can treat this as a simpler chord and then just add one of the notes in as part of the melody. So for example, instead of trying to play all the notes of this chord, you can just play a simpler major 7 sharp 11 chord, because the only note that you're going to be really adding here that's not going to be ringing out with the rest of the notes is the 5th. So what you could do is you could play the chord like this, and then just move your first finger up to play the 5th, or F in this case. Do something like that. If you can reach it up here, you could basically do the same thing, but it becomes much harder. How I like to do it though is I like to play it like this. So I'm holding down the E here so I can let the F ring out with it, so you get that little bit of that tension. And then the rest of the chord is the same. And then you can take those chords, how I play them, and do the same thing here for F sharp. And then everything else the same. So you can play those chords in a different manner than trying to do the super stretchy one that most people, at least I can't. Also, for these chords, these add 11 chords, they're also pretty tricky. You can also play them like this. It's basically like a sus2 chord, but then you're playing a different note on the A string. What you could do is you can take that note on the A string and move it to the E string. So instead of trying to play this chord like this, you can move this A to the 17th fret and have this. And then when you play the D minor at 11, you can play it like that, and then C major with the add 11. This way that these chords are played are very similar to 54 Duncan Terrace that I've done. The only problem is when you do the D minor, the add 11, you can't hit the C on top like here. But that's purely for melody. If you wanted to just play this as a comp, you can put that major third or minor third on the low E string instead of the A string. So you can do something like. And then instead of playing it like this, once again you can just play it like that. So those are that's an optional way of doing that section. The sus2 part is exactly the same. I mean, you don't have to really play it the same way as Allan does it. There's also a lot of rhythm variation there. It's very free. But instead of doing this, which could be tricky, you can just take that sus2 chord and then move it up to here, to a D flat sus2, or something that belongs to the key of F sharp major or B major. And you'll see sometimes he does that. So that's another sort of shortcut that you can take. Instead of playing this, you can just play a C sharp sus4, I mean, or I think it's F sharp sus2. Something like that. I've seen him do that a couple of times, but most of the time he's actually playing this chord. This part, exactly the same. Sometimes I don't think he plays the notes on the A string, he'll play them all on the E string. But the bass is playing what I just played in the previous part. So I'm pretty sure that's what's really supposed to be played, and he's just adding in variation. Now for this section here, as I said, there's a lot of variation with how he plays some of these. It's more melodic than it is structural with these chords in it. He'll do like, whoops. Something like that. So you don't have to you don't have to play it exactly that way, but sometimes he'll play these major 7 chords. Oops. And then instead of the D add 11, he'll play this G major 7. And even with the next part, he'll play that same chord, but now in A. So those are just an alternate way of doing that instead of trying to do all these things as stretches. Well, I like how that sounds better, but something like that. And then once again, that last chord, instead of doing that crazy stretch, you can play it as just this regular major 7 sharp 11, and then just bring your first finger up to play that perfect 5th. And even these chords have some variation. Like you don't even have to play it like this. You can play it like that, or even once again, there's tons of variation, but that's more often than not what he's playing. You can even take this chord, and if you don't want to play it here, you can play it down a group of strings and play it like that. So there's all different ways of playing it. I play it down here. I like how that sounds. So those are all the little variations of how Allan sort of plays it, or just easier ways of playing that chord. So I'm going to use this little part right now to actually play through it how I play, so you can sort of hear how it sounds together. So that's kind of how I play and how it sounds all together. Oh, and another thing, when Allan's actually comping the chords over Steve Hunt's solo, or any keyboard player, instead of playing these crazy chords, he actually will just play that add 11 chord. So he'll play this as an A major add 11. So it'll sound like this. Whoops. And then F add 11. Like that. So instead of trying to do those stretches, I guess how he interprets it like that. And once again, if you can do that, if you want to put the bass note on the low E string, you can, but you can see you kind of run out of room here, so it might be easier to actually play it this way. So that's that section, and that's really the whole song. So now I'm going to talk about the next section, the harmony of how to play over this part. And it's something that I kind of learned Allan's thought process about sections like that. So in this next section, I'll talk about that. So after analyzing a bunch of Allan's songs and learning the solo section harmonies and the chords, I've noticed that Allan has really two approaches to improvisation, and it sounds really broad because it kind of is, but it's very simple. There are sometimes sections where the chords are very specific and Allan's playing very melodic over them, and there's not a lot of outside playing. Something like especially if you're given a major 7 sharp 11, like I was doing before, that's very specific to a key. So he'll be playing that very diatonic. He'll be playing this as a E flat Lydian, or even how he would think of it as a C Dorian over that. But then there are sections where I sort of think of them as kitchen sink sections, where those are where all the weird licks come from. And I think when Allan was looking through the thesaurus of scales and melodic patterns, this is where he would use those melodic ideas. And there's two sort of subsections for that, where he has sort of kitchen sink parts. There are parts in the song where it's like A minor for 4 measures, and in that he'll just throw everything at it. Sort of like, think of Devil Take the Hindmost. That whole section is basically just G, and it's G minor, and Allan just plays everything over that. He uses a lot of interesting sort of symmetrical patterns, outside playing, stuff from the third Messiaen mode. I think that's how you say it. You know, it's just everything that you can do, because it's basically just G over that. And you have all this room to play. But there are also sections that are similar in aspect, but the chords underneath them are not that free. For example, this section. The chords in this part are so harmonically dense that if you try to follow each one chord by chord, you would never be able to do it. So I think what happens is, in these sections, even though they're harmonically dense, this is Allan's time to sort of just rip and just play outside and just have fun sort of playing it. And I watched a great video a while ago. Rick Beato put out a video about, I think he called it Holdsworth Bitonalism, and he talks about this particular section. He doesn't write the chords out, but he just talks about the essence of what these sections are. And all it is, it's to provide a lot of tension that gets released afterwards. So instead of a chord, one chord being very tense and then anticipating its release, this whole section is just used to build tension that's released by the part after it. So I'll just sort of skip it. And then there's your, at least for him, your release after that. And now you start to play more diatonic, whereas before, over this whole section, it's almost anything goes. So now I'm going to bring out the whiteboard and I'll sort of talk about the harmony and how Allan probably thinks of that section harmonically. Alright, so here I actually wrote out all the chords as slash chords so it's easier to see. Now if you don't know what a slash chord is, you're probably watching the wrong video, but just to summarize it quickly, it's basically a triad, a major or minor, with a specific note on the bass. That's it. So E sus4 with an F sharp in the bass, F major with an E in the bass, A flat major with an A in the bass, F major, A flat in the bass. So this is just the first half, because the first part of the song, it's here, and then it transposes down a fourth. So since they're both identical, I'm just going to talk about this section, and it'll just relate over to the next part. So now to try to figure out what's going on here, I'm going to now take all the notes from these chords and just write them out, and I'll put them in order. So these are all the notes that are inside of all of these chords. E sus4 with an F sharp in the bass, E, A, B, that's our E sus4, with our F sharp in the bass, F, A, C, F major, with the E, on and on. You can see even the top part, like I said before, E sus4, F, A flat, F, E sus4, F, A flat, and then he uses this chord to pivot, to transpose now a fourth down. But these are all the notes. Now, just to save time, I'm now going to organize all these notes into one large section. Alright, so now I just took all the notes and I just arranged them all in order. No duplicates. So now we're trying to figure out what's actually going on in here. It might not be quite obvious to look at it, but if you see we have like a half step, and a whole step, and a half step, and a whole step, and a half step. Maybe I'm giving it away a little bit, but it could be easier to now, if I take this E, instead of putting it there, and I put it here, then let's try to actually see the intervals that we got here. So this is our root, this is our 1, flat 9, this would be our sharp 9, our major 3rd, our flat 5, our perfect 5th, our sharp 5, or you could think of it as a flat 6, you could think of that as a flat 7, and a major 7. So, flat 9, sharp 9, we have a dominant here, but this is kind of a diminished scale. This is kind of like the diminished dominant scale, or the half-whole scale. So this gets supported because Allan, when he was playing the song, Steve Hunt had asked him about this, and in one of Rick Beato's videos, he asked Steve Hunt about this section, and Steve had said that Allan sort of thought of it diminished. You'll see in this clip here.
Sometimes you would come up with a set of scales that would go over these structures, and some nights it would work, and then other nights you feel like you're playing the wrong notes. And he had the same feeling. He's like, and so he'd ask me like, "What are you playing over this?" You know, and the one section that goes. Because the chord, the melody chord is just a constant structure that goes over the D and the C and the E flat and the G. So it's kind of like D minor, C minor, but is it D minor with the E flat, or is it D minor with the E? You know, sometimes, and so you know, those kind of things, and you had to realize that it really depended on where your line was coming from and where it was going, whether you played a certain scale or another. I don't know. It was very interesting. So in that sense, but those were kind of normal. The other section,
the other sections I was talking about,
all those things, I could see some kind of scales, and he thought kind of diminished in that section. So, which was a little hard for me to see in there, but I could see how you could see the diminished part in there with the F over A flat and the, but on that section, I started doing this thing where I was working out these 3 triad kind of things, like a F triad, A flat triad, A triad, and you turn into that scale, and it kind of incorporates all those triads. And so I would just stop thinking about all those things moving and play, you know, and think more in those kind of like groups of triads, and it seemed to work. You know, I got through them. You know, and that whole thing shifts down like a 4, I think, and it repeats that same section.
So as you can see in that clip, he says that Allan sort of thought of it diminished, and you can kind of see where it's coming from. It's not perfectly diminished because there's no double flat 7 or 6, but overall the tonality is kind of diminished like. And I had also asked my friend Marc Lambert, about this section just to double check. So I had a hunch about this, and when I had asked him about it, I didn't tell him anything except I just gave him the chords, and he came to the same conclusion, that it's more of like a diminished like. And he went to school for music, and he knows more than I do with that stuff. I didn't go to music school, but I felt that I was right because we both came to the same conclusion. And this section happens, these kind of sections happen in a few of Allan's songs. They happen in Where Is One. There's a part there in the solo section that's like this. Spokes has a section where a lot of that playing is not necessarily, not playing to the chord, it's just the chords themselves go by so fast and it's so dissonant and outside that basically you could do anything that you want over it. And in this case, basically he's thinking of diminished, but not necessarily playing perfectly diatonic to diminished, or the half-whole scale. So that's where you see all the really cool symmetrical diminished lines and stuff are being played over this. And yeah, so that's what's going on there. And I thought that was very interesting, and a lot of Allan songs have that, where there's a section where you can sort of play outside and be very free to basically do whatever it is that you want, and those two sections are either having chords that are very dissonant, or that don't really follow any particular pattern, or it's just an entire section that's basically an A, like I said before in Devil Take the Hindmost. It's just G that's being played over that, so you could do anything that you want over that. But in this one, with all those chords going by so fast, that's your opportunity to just do whatever. And if you just watch any Allan videos of him playing the song live, you'll see when it gets to this part in the solo, that's your let loose, throw the kitchen sink, do whatever it is that you want, and you'll end up landing on your feet, because this is creating all that dissonance that's being resolved by the next chord, and then he'll start playing diatonic. So there you have it, Funnels by Allan Holdsworth. I apologize for these videos getting pretty long. I kind of get really into it and sort of lose track of time, but I hope some of you don't mind, because you'll be learning something, and if you're as passionate as I am about these songs or teaching them, hopefully you'll understand. But that's it, that's the song, and if you got any questions, please let me know. Once again, thank you to my friend Marc for helping me out for that outside section. And if you want to learn more about any of that weird kind of Holdsworthian Bitonalism that Rick Beato called it, I'll link to his video. He's got some great videos, and he's a real teacher, whereas I feel like I'm kind of a fake one with my little setup here. But regardless, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.